And that's how the Q&A went down. Special thanks again to screenwriter Eric Roth for joining us today to discuss his latest film, The Curious Case of Benjamin Button. Howdy, I'm Jeff Goldsmith, senior editor for creative screenwriting, and yes, I was starting at the end and the beginning, just like the movie. Okay, I was going to do a much more elaborate version of that, but how about this? I'm exhausted, so that was enough, don't you think? I am, though, very excited that we did get Eric Roth to discuss Benjamin Button with us. This podcast was conducted after he was WGA and Oscar nominated, but before the big 2009 Oscar panel that we did, and I just had to choose between which one I was going to post first, and I thought it was fair to everybody to post the Oscar panel first. So yes, we're going a little out of order for those of you in LA that go to our screenings, but it'll do. Of course, don't forget to go to www.creativescreenwriting.com to read all about what's in our latest issue, which you could find on newsstands in Barnes & Noble and Borders bookshops in the United States, Canada, the UK, Western Europe, and of course, Australia. But now, without further ado, let's jump right onto the stage of our packed screening right after I introduced screenwriter Eric Roth to talk about his adaptation of The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, based on a short story by F. Scott Fitzgerald and a story by Eric Roth and Robin Swicord. As is our tradition, we like to do this when we can. I have the November-December issue of Creative Screenwriting Magazine. Right there on the cover, Eric Roth. There you are, sir.
Looks like Peter Morgan.
Yeah, Peter Morgan's up there, but you're right there. And then, of course, we also have for you our January-February issue.
Can't wait.
Where you made our editor's picks for the best screenwriting of 2008.
Wow.
Of course, congratulations on your recent nominations. We always like to start with breaking in stories, kind of to get a baseline on your career and where you come from. Talk about breaking into the entertainment industry and going down the path towards writing. What was your first job?
I went to Columbia University. I took a lot of film classes after. I was an English major. And I was involved with some sort of underground film workshops in New York. Work with Bob Downey Sr., that's how old I am. Work with Ed Emschweiler, just working as crew and sort of things like that. And Columbia had a graduate school in film, but I took like maybe a couple months of it. And I made a short that won a contest. And I came out here then. Also got married very young. I was married when I was like 18, 19. And I went briefly to school at Folklore Department at UCLA, where I entered the Samuel Gowen Writing Award. And I happened to win that, which got me an agent. And that was the most important thing of everything I just told you.
Who was your first agent?
A woman named Blossom Khan, who got me a job, and I think I fired her very shortly thereafter. And
sticking with tradition.
Yeah, exactly. And I went on to a big agency, William Morris at the time, and I've just been lucky. I've just been gainfully employed basically since then, which was 1970.
You did a lot of assignment writing early on, is that correct?
I'm not sure what you mean by that.
Just assignments. You would do rewrites. You would do open writing assignments. It wasn't really like the spec market that we kind of now know, to my knowledge.
Well, yeah. Well, I've always been really just a working writer. I mean, I've never thought of myself in any way, shape, or form different. I would, I guess, if you say assignments, yeah. But I don't think I've ever. I don't know if I've ever written a spec screenplay. So, quite honestly. Maybe the one I wrote for the Samuel Gowen Writing Award. I don't think I've ever. I mean, I'm just saying it's pure luck. I think for a certain amount of time I was a good writer who was underpaid, so that was good for them, you know. And now I'm okay and overpaid.
I beg to differ.
Well, I don't know.
A lot of our readers and subscribers...
Why am I holding the...
Yeah, you can put them back. A lot of our readers and subscribers and even our podcast listeners, they really look up to you. Who were some of your screenwriting heroes when you were starting out?
I love Stuart Stern. I loved Bo Goldman, who I worked with, actually. I think he's probably one of the best writers ever was. Alvin Sargent was kind of my mentor of a kind. The Raviches, Irving and Harriet Ravitch. Trying to think who else. Bobtown. I mean, probably the ones you'd assume, That was more sort of, they were just a little older than me.
Just before we get to tonight's film, I just want to do a brief two-question revisitation of three of your films that I know are favorites of our fans, of your fans. I'm gonna make it a really easy question. If you could remember what kind of was your toughest scene, the one scene that you kind of had to crack, for instance, on Forrest Gump, that you really kind of struggled with, and how you got through it.
I don't know if I ever looked at things that way. I mean, in other words, I think I would say more in Forrest Gump as I probably went further with some abstractions which aren't in the movie anymore. But I had things that I had a lot of cartoon stuff that was in the movie, and then Zemeckis decided to take it out, whether right or wrong. But probably was indulgences. So I say part of my problem is I probably overwrite. But like Lieutenant Dan in that movie, I had for a long time in the movie have a black cloud over his head until he was able to sort of meet his maker, and then the cloud went away. And I had, I think, sometimes I would do things like cartoon of what Forrest Gump would see people. He'd say they look like watermelon heads, and he'd see people with watermelon heads. I don't know, I think it's probably a good idea to get rid of it.
Creative idea, though. Cool idea.
I don't know what... I'm sure there were things that stumped me that, I mean, as much as anything else in any other movie. I mean, there's things you just run into. I don't really, I'm a pretty brave writer, so I don't think I have much in the way of writer's block, and I've always said when I get in trouble with scenes, I just change the weather, because it makes it, make it rain, and all of a sudden you sort of look at it a different way.
You've also had the luxury of working with some really amazing directors, on Forrest Gump. What was something that you learned from working with Zemeckis? Something stuck with you, maybe?
I guess what stuck with me is he's an oddball guy. I remember asking him why he was shooting a particular scene. It was a ping pong scene of Tom playing ping pong with his supposed son, and I remember he came across a building, side of a house, the side of the house to get into the scene. And I said, "Why would you do it that way?" He said, "Well, anybody can shoot people playing ping pong." And so it was like he always wanted to find some different way to do it, which I thought was kind of interesting. Why not?
I'm a fan of The Insider. Are there any scenes that were kind of left on the cutting room floor that you want to discuss, or a tough scene to get out of, and also what it was like working with Michael Mann?
Michael's great. I mean, he's a tough taskmaster. I call him an obsessed plumber. He just kind of keeps he keeps banging away. I mean, we would have things written, and then he'd turn them all over the night before he shot them. He said, "I think we fucked this whole thing up. We got to start from scratch." And I'd work all night, and then he'd shoot exactly as was written. Basically, I'm trying to think what. I'm not sure what was left.
Or even a tough scene. Or
no,
something.
I know. Well, that was a tough movie for me. It was totally unlike anything I'd written, and the movie's. I think it's a great movie. Probably the best thing I've written to a certain extent, but it's a cheat in a way. The movie is riddled with exposition. But you don't notice it because it's well done. So like the. And I'd say this is why I'm repeating this, because I think it's hard to do. You have to. That's the kind of movie it's like you have to lay out for an audience what to expect, because it's not really a thriller. It's a social document, and yet it's not polemic. I mean, in other words, it's a combination of many things, and it's an odd movie, I think. And there's a scene, CBS lunchroom, where they're talking about what they're going to do for him, and it's real pure screenwriting 101 that you wouldn't want anybody to do, exposition. Where Lowell Bergman says, "We need to get this guy a lawyer. We need to get him, whatever." I mean, lists 8 things which become the tasks of the movie per se, And it's pretty interesting, and we got away with it. I mean, nobody said, well, this is sort of nonsense. It wouldn't probably be what the conversation was, you know. And there was no subtext to it, just being right on the nose. Did that answer your question? No?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I love that movie, and that's a great scene.
Yeah, I love that movie. That movie's pretty great. I mean, really, I think for... No, not because I did it. No,
I think it's excellent. So please leave it
it's a tough movie. I think on a degree of difficulty, it's a hard movie, and it's a shame it didn't. It did well, like awards, and I think it's held up well over time. But the audience was afraid to go see it because they thought it was either going to be about smoking's bad for you or some insider's guide to 60 Minutes. You know, in other words, neither, which was. And then the studio. Mike Eisner was a great supporter of the movie at first, then became kind of a prick about it. He was friends with Don Hewitt, thank you, and for whatever reasons, they convinced him that maybe some of the movie wasn't accurate, and I think the movie was deadly accurate to the point. Just feel if you'd be interested in them, if you've heard me say this before, but it's this: Mike Wallace used to call me at home and say, "How dare you? You know, Lowell Bergman thinks he's a moral arbiter and this and that." And I would write down every word, and it's right in the movie. You know,
best place for dialogue is from the source, of course.
Yeah, exactly.
Last question about a previous movie before tonight's movie. I really loved the work that you did on Munich as well. So anything...
Well, I mean, I can only take half credit.
Right, half credit with Tony Kushner.
And half blame. So,
talk about a tough challenge from Munich. And
Munich was really hard. I mean, Munich was, I think, the most difficult, for me, probably the most difficult thing for many reasons. My feelings about Israel, which are, I'm more hawkish probably than some, and but conflicted. I understand the humanitarian thing about it. Also, I'm a sort of proud Jew and all. Also, I understood Stephen's position. Stephen was in the position of feeling the same way, and yet being sort of maybe the best-known Jew in the world, having a burden of maybe feeling like he's attacking Israel. You know, a guy who did so much for Shoah and everything else, and so he wanted it to be as accurate as possible. There's some things that could be debatable about it, and yet you want the movie to be an entertainment of a kind. I mean, so it's a real tightrope walk. So that there's scenes in there. Some I wrote. I mean, most of them I wrote, like the action ones, which are really genre pieces. I mean, they're accurate as to what they did and how they did it, but they've been exaggerated to a certain extent about cars blocking cars, or the little girl coming back for the phone, and so you get then into a world of entertainment that's not. So it's not Z or Battle of Algiers you're seeing, and yet, on the other hand, it's, I think, a powerful movie. I'm conflicted about the movie. I have mixed feelings about it. I think some of it worked, some of it didn't work. Some of it worked because I did a good job, and some of it didn't work because I probably missed some things, and I think same goes for Tony.
I'd say it works. Talk about working with Spielberg. What were some of the habits you noticed?
I've known Steven from when I was a younger man, and he a younger man. He's, I mean, all the directors I think that I've worked with I think they're all been pretty talented people, have, sort of common traits, which I think is a common trait of good directors or creative people in any field, where they'll ask you the very difficult questions and want the difficult answers so that they can feel comfortable doing it. He needed a little more on this, Stephen, because he wanted to feel that he was kind of protected from all flanks, in other words, and I think it's one of the reasons, this is no way a knock on Tony Kushner, who's a very good friend of mine and certainly one of the better writers of our generation, at least in the theater, that he represented a Jewish intellectual for Stephen, that Stephen felt he needed, in case of people attacking the movie. Stephen's very scrupulous. He's quiet. I don't know. It's it's just a personality.
Was there anything about the notes he gave you on your screenplay that kind of rang different or interesting?
No, not
okay.
Really. I think they were good notes. They were the kind of notes. But Stephen was. I don't know how to put this because I don't want to make it sound like a knock. Stephen wanted to make sure he was making the movie that he should make. And he may always do that, I don't know. I've only worked with him once and a half.
What was the half?
Well, I've done some other work for him.
Okay.
But so I think it's different than where you have sort of free reign. In other words, I'm not saying, I'm not articulating this very well, but I mean, on some other movies where we could then be as sort of free creatively, I'm not sure he could, because he was under certain constraints of what he felt he had to articulate about the situation, about a country, about protecting certain, that whole thing.
And history as well.
And history, and
yeah.
So I think it's it's a hard way to do a movie. It's a hard way to do a movie.
Well, I'm a fan. It's great work. Moving on to tonight's film.
Okay.
Starting with the, obviously, F. Scott Fitzgerald short story, which appeared in 1922 Collier's Weekly.
Right.
I believe, according to the article that we ran in the magazine, it was Sherry Lansing that first introduced you to The Curious Case of Benjamin Button.
Yeah, Sherry Lansing had asked me if I was interested in doing it, and then handed me over to Kathy Kennedy, basically.
So what was your first reaction to the story when you read it?
I wasn't wild about the story. Not to knock Fitzgerald, it just was too farcical for me. But I love the central core of it, obviously, about somebody going backwards, And I then did two things. One was, since there was somebody who spent a good deal of her life working on it, Robin Swicord, who did...
Robin Swicord shared story by credit with you in this
screen story credit, and I called her and asked her if I got involved in this, how would you feel about me rewriting, which is sort of unwritten. I don't know if it's a written, but I think it's at least an unwritten league rule kind of thing. You're supposed to do in the guild to.
It's a gentlemanly thing to do.
Yeah, in other words, because someone could be getting fired by fiat, or in other words, and I wanted to make sure it wasn't one of these odd, some kind of uncomfortable situation, because I just wouldn't have taken the job. And she said no, that it wasn't going anywhere with her at this moment, and. But she asked me if I wouldn't read her screenplay, which I thought was fair enough, and I said fine, because I really planned to start from scratch. And so some things a couple of ingredients in an odd way filtered in from her screenplay, and I think through the producers probably, and she was entitled to the credit she got, no question about it. But and long live her, because she spent so many years doing this. So for just the time spent, she should get a pat on the back,
What year was it when you first started writing?
Well, I started in 2001, 2002. She started, I think she started like 1990, She'd been on it for like 12 years, so my hat's off to her, But it hadn't gone and I have no idea what the reasons are, and there's never a reason. Her version might have been the best version in the history of America, but it didn't get made, so.
Sure. But moving on to your version, so after you started, how long would you say it took you to decide, first off, yes, there's a film here, and it's something you wanted to pursue until you got your first draft, basically?
Well, it wasn't a normal time that it takes me to write a script. It took me about a year and a few months. I just said, what, I'll take the... well, I just want to add one thing. So Robin was part A. Part B was... I wanted to find out that in some way I wasn't doing a disservice to F. Scott Fitzgerald, another, because he could write me under the table any day of the week, and also drink me under the table, I'm sure. And so I talked to a friend of mine who I know fairly well, A. Scott Berg, who's a Pulitzer Prize-winning author and biographer, and he knows a lot about F. Scott Fitzgerald's life, and he said from what he knew from the research and everything about him, that this was really written as a whimsy. Not that he obviously didn't take the time to write and care about it, but that he wrote it in a very brief period of time, and it was, and to some extent, to earn money. He got like $1,000 for it, which was a lot of money at that time, and he had just had a baby, Scotty, who was 3 months old, I guess. So it was to put sort of diapers on her, and as I understand it, so that I didn't feel I was tampering with something that was, I don't know how we determined that really, but that it wasn't this author's sort of heart and soul.
But it's interesting to note that he had just become a father. I mean, that is...
Yeah, I know. I think that's probably that, along with the fact that Maxwell Perkins, his editor, had given him an essay by Mark Twain about that he had written about. It's a shame that we have to have all the infirmities of old age and sort of youth being wasted on the young. So those two things could kind of dovetail for him, as I understand it. And he sat and wrote this, and it was actually turned down by two magazines, the Metropolitan, which was a big magazine at the time, and the Saturday Evening Post, which was the biggest. And I'm not sure which. One thought it was badly written, and one didn't like thought it was a silly story or something. And so when I felt I had that permission, and maybe I would have taken it anyway. So maybe it was just a good excuse, But I said, I'll take a crack at this. And
in your process, how important is outlining when you sit down to write something?
Don't ever do it.
Interesting.
Yeah, haven't. I mean, I always know the beginning and I know the end, and I don't think there's any movie I've ever written that hasn't been shot that way. I mean, which is kind of weird. I think the only difference in Munich, for instance, was that I had them talking on a street, and Stephen put them with the backdrop of the World Trade Center's buildings. But I don't think there's any movie that ended up with a different beginning or end scene. So
when you sit down to write each day, what is your habit? How many hours a day do you write for?
About 4. That's about all I can be creative for. I do every day I write, though. I'm pretty disciplined. I start from page 1 every day, which they've told me is sort of foolish, because you don't, for the end of the script, you're not putting in the same time. It's mathematically a bad idea. But I sort of go back every day to see if there's something I can improve. To
my knowledge, your mother passed away during the writing of the script,
yeah.
and I think it really probably informed the story. Could you talk about that?
Yeah, I think it completely informed it. My mom was diagnosed with cancer about the same time I started writing. It's probably one of the reasons I decided to write it. I mean, because I knew that she was in her 80s, so she was 81, and her days were numbered. And so it dovetailed, I think, with the theme of the piece, about time. And it's always sort of something I think I find in my writing. That's why you feel some similarities with Forrest Gump. I mean, about time passing and children growing up. I mean, it's just something. I have grandchildren and children, and it's sort of on my mind. Mortality is just, and loneliness. I mean, it's all sort of themes of things I do. And so that was certainly a personal kind of, obviously, collaboration in a way. I mean, because my mom, and things in here are right out of my mother's mouth. I mean, where I said to her, "Are you afraid, Mom?" And she said, "No, I'm curious." So that's up there. And then after about a year, my dad started to pass away. So I got double whammy about. I knew a lot about death. So.
I mean, there's a lot of it in the movie.
Well, it's a movie about death. That's what David Finch says. Who's going to give you $150 million to do a movie about death? And but I think it's about life. I mean, I think it's just that the natural order of things, and that's what I sort of feel with my parents' death. I mean, that was their time to die.
Is that where the framing device of reading the journals from a deathbed came from?
Yeah, it was like, if I sort of felt like, what if my mother had something she wanted to tell me, and I know this is, not the most sophisticated device of a diary or something, but it was just, from a deathbed kind of thing, and I thought it was a good way to jump back and forth in time, and so that's what it is.
You've always had a great talent for transitions. The transitions between what's happening in the front story and then coming back to even just reading the journal. How important are transitions when you write them?
I guess I do. I mean, I guess I did in The Good Shepherd, too. That was a little more confusing for people. But I think they're important, yeah. I mean, I don't know.
Is this something that comes late in your drafts, kind of like in a polish, like towards the end?
No. I start right from scratch. I have a plan how I'm going to do it. So maybe I do outline in my own head in that way. No, I just sort of like, putting Forrest Gump on the bench or something, and say, well, if I plant them there, I could tell the story that way. I think I keep doing that. I'm just writing a love story, and I have one of the characters, a doctor who is supposed to be a gerontologist, and she's or geriatrician, I guess they call themselves now. But she's with a woman who has Alzheimer's, and a woman says to her, "What if I lose my memory? Will I ever existed?" And I said, well, that's an interesting idea to open a movie with. And then I go back in time with this woman, so I'll probably come back to that once in a while. I don't know. But maybe I do that too much.
In a movie like this, You jump around time a lot. Did you ever get lost in time? I would assume on the page you would have to really remind the reader what year it is. And
the only thing I had to do is I had to keep track of his age at various times.
And what year it is.
Yeah, I'm not too good at math, so I left a list there so that I could get an idea of what sort of what age he's supposed to be, what emotional age he's supposed to be, and where he would be in the order of things, where we would be in time too.
There's almost two framing devices here in which there's the blind watch clockmaker in the beginning, and the film ends with an image of the clock. What did that story mean to you?
I just wanted to sort of, obviously the clock going backwards becomes sort of this sort of magical realism, I guess, of a kind, and I wanted to, it's, I guess, to put the audience in the sense that we're doing some kind of fable, and then the whole notion of just time going backwards. That's an interesting idea, you know. I don't know where it came from. I guess felt like it was like I was watching my mom on morphine, and I figured, what's she thinking about? And she was saying all sorts of gibberish and certain ideas. And I said, it'd be kind of interesting if I tied something in that she was talking about that seemed to maybe be real and not real, and then you come back to this reality, and then we go into this other unreal story, this sort of parallel universe, which is the Benjamin Button story. So they kind of dovetail, and then I knew the ending was going to be that clock. See, so like I said, I knew that. Somehow I figured that out, and then Fincher actually added the water rushing in, which was pretty brilliant, which made my image much more powerful. It wasn't my idea.
We talked earlier about the directors. Obviously, your great collaborator here was David Fincher. He did an amazing job directing. What was it like when he came onto the project and you guys first met, and I would assume went through your screenplay?
I had never met him, and he had all this reputation as this big bad boy, and it reminded me of it reminded me of when I've told this before, but of like John Lennon, the Beatle, was sort of like wary of meeting Frank Zappa, because Frank Zappa had an album cover where he was on the toilet, and he figured, who's this fucking guy, you know? So I heard not Fincher had been on a toilet, but it's like a guy who like Heads in Boxes, that's the movies he made, and
with Brad Pitt.
Yeah, with Brad Pitt, and so I didn't know really what his intent was with this, what interested him about this, and he. And the first day I remember us working, we just do a normal thing any director and writer would do, start from page one, after we'd spent a week talking about what we think this means to us. And he said, well, we have this, originally this, the stuff with Cate Blanchett as an old woman her dying was supposed to be in the old age home. And David said, let's put this in, this is scene one, let's move this to a hospital with paint chipping away and pretty bleak, and I said, oh, okay, I get it. I figured this is how it's going to go. We're going to sort of dirty everything up, and it wasn't ever after that. That was the only time we did that kind of thing. And it was it was just as good as any other director. I think he's a pretty unique man. He's not particularly educated in the sense of college education. Never went to college. I'm not sure he finished high school, for instance, but he's also as wise as anybody I've ever met that way. Very great education, street education, and he asked the right questions. He's very tough. Different tough than Michael. Michael, as I said, is this kind of pain-in-the-ass plumber type, but David keeps challenging you. In other words, there's sort of sardonic quality, and but he's also very caring about what you're doing, and he'll work as hard as you do, and that's what these relationships are always good if you can find people that you can creatively work with, because early on we sort of said to each other, whether we said it tacitly or we said it out loud, that I don't want to disappoint you and you don't want to disappoint me, so that we said we'll do this together,
He's a great visual storyteller. Were there any kind of rewrites or notes that you remember him giving you that kind of just changed the script in your mind's eye?
Not particularly. Honestly, I'm very visual too, so that I think he took whatever the visuals were and tried to make them even better, and I think he sort of got the tone I wanted it to be, and he translated that pretty well. I think the biggest thing he did for the screenwriting was he would question me always about why certain characters existed. How are they going to inform our main character? And at first I was a little more capricious with it, and then I started feeling I better give them each something that is remembered. And and he's the one who came up with the notion, I thought was pretty great, about that a lot of people we meet are people we don't remember their names, and yet they represent something to us in life and maybe even teach us more valuable lessons than people we know.
It was originally set in Baltimore.
Yeah, the story, this F. Scott Fitzgerald story, is set there in...
it was tax breaks that brought it to Louisiana,
yeah,
correct?
Part of it. Yeah, most of it, really. They went to Baltimore and they found that there was also, as you can see, the boat stuff was real important. And the stuff they have in Chesapeake Bay now is so modern and so different than anything could have been at the turn of the century or the 1920s and all 30s. And so they also did not have the amount of money they felt they needed to make this. And so a number of states were offering rebates at that time and to bring in crews and to bring in dollars to the states. And Louisiana was one of them. So he went down to New Orleans and looked at locations and started sending me back photographs and saying, what do you think? And as soon as I wrote Exterior New Orleans Street Day, I mean, it's sort of, that's the end of my job with that. In other words, it doesn't take a genius to figure out, that you've created a whole other character that doesn't need much description,
When did you decide to incorporate Katrina? And what did that mean?
We had written it. They had gone down there to get ready to start shooting, and Katrina came, so they had to stop. And then we had to. Then they decided, and then they had to figure out whether we were going to be able to go back at all because of Katrina doing such devastation. And New Orleans said, "Yeah, we want you to come, and we can make certain areas, available for you to work in." And then we had a decision to make whether we wanted to end it prior to Katrina arriving or utilize Katrina. And we felt we'd be remiss not to use it as a something that's just part of America.
Well, it also relates to the story in which, as Daisy dies, kind of the city of New Orleans.
Well, that's the whole
dies.
idea. Yeah, so we just sort of linked that. Yeah.
You've always had a great strength for ensemble character writing, with each of your characters having their own distinctive voices. What's that like for you to manage on the page to make sure that the voices don't blend and that everyone's goals are kind of separate and unique, but at the same time they feel like they're in the same movie?
Yeah, I don't find that a big problem. I think I always remember. I think I did this before then, but I did some rewriting on a movie called Year of the Dragon for Mike Cimino with Mickey Rourke and all. And I remember he had made for Mickey Rourke a wallet that had all these things that you'll never see. In other words, it had the character's driver's license, social security license number, had pictures of his Vietnam. He had been a soldier, supposedly, stuff from Vietnam, and you realize these characters all have to have their own unique, distinguishing characteristics. And I don't know. I guess I just learned from my own English background that the really good writing of people who have distinctive voices. That's why I always say to new writers and things, these voices better ring somehow true and also something I haven't heard, and they're all different. They're not all the same. And I've never had a problem with it. I don't know why, but it's just. I guess I get real involved with the characters and what their psychological makeups are, where they come from, where they're going, and all that.
Do you put that down on paper? As kind of
no, not really. Yeah. I mean, I might scratch some things out, but I sort of get to know each of them differently.
You obviously, in a film like this, when there's such a great cast like Brad Pitt and Cate Blanchett and Tilda Swinton, and actually the entire cast, sometimes actors need revisions as well. Was there any rewriting that was done based on ideas from actors?
Oh yeah, I mean. There was sometimes a normal kind of thing where they, I'll never forget the one lesson I learned I had written on the Insider, like a 3-page monologue, which I thought was like Shakespeare, and Al Pacino did it with one look, and that was the end of that discussion. And, but they asked the same kind of questions. Why am I doing this? This is the most important one. And obviously they have the hard job. If they're going to come out of the trailer and portray people, they better know why they're doing it. And, we had 2 weeks or 3 weeks almost of rehearsals where we'd have principals in each of the scenes sit with me and David, and we'd read it and we'd talk about it and figure out what was good or bad about it. And Cate Blanchett was always the smartest one in the room. It wasn't even close. And she could always, you could give her any kind of way to do the scene, and she said, I could do it this way, that way. I mean, she was like, get out of here, And I've been sort of upset because I think she's been overlooked for these award nonsense, but because she's so good. I mean, she just never, to me, misses a beat, you know.
She gave a great performance. Was there anything that Brad Pitt had a suggestion for, an idea for that?
Yeah, well, I think his was he was real interested in this whole idea of which I had talked to him about, but this idea of missed opportunities that everybody has in their lives with relationships, that you think something's going to happen and it doesn't, and you wish it had, and then you wish you hadn't done something foolish, or you'd done something, you know, all these kind of things that just happen in normal life, and so that was something that he was big on. And he also wanted to make sure he didn't, I mean, this is sort of a tough thing to ask an actor to do. I mean, okay, from your experience, we want you to figure out how you age backwards, you know? And I thought he played, I mean, we've been criticized in a way, which I find an interesting discussion about, that he's too passive, you know, he's a passive protagonist, which you're not supposed to have. You're supposed to be a very reactive guy, and I think he's just perfect, because I think he's observer, as many quiet people are. He's a listener, and Fincher said something kind of interesting about one of the things that he likes about the movie is that it's a movie that has no backstory. In other words, because you see everything that happens to him, experience with him all the way to the end. So you don't need any of those kind of dramatic, cathartic scenes where you say, well, gee, when I was 6, my mom beat me, or my father left me, and you know. And so those are easier and oddly to write, because you can have someone chew up the scenery then about how they're, you know, how it's killing them inside. But this you have to experience with them. It's not as emotive in that sense, you know, where it's not like I don't know, but so it's different. It's a more it's a quieter portrait of somebody who has to just, you're now following their journey, you know.
I was chatting with a friend of mine. His name's Nev Pierce. He's a brilliant. He's editor-at-large for Empire Magazine.
Oh, he loved it.
In the United Kingdom. He's great.
Yeah.
He loves the film.
Yeah.
He told me a story that I would love for you to tell tonight, about how David Fincher asked you what regrets Benjamin has, and that led to a very interesting rewrite.
It did.
So Nev says, and he could be lying to me. He said that it led to Tilda Swinton's character kind of being involved as a rewrite about a lost love. No?
No.
I'm going to kill Nev Pierce. All right.
Yeah. Well, no, I think he may have confused. I mean, that thing, Tilda Swinton thing was just that was like a conceit that I decided. Okay. That I was writing a novel, and I decided to write a short story within the novel about this little kind of romance. And I realized, I know where it came from. I didn't know it at the time, but that a lot of times I stay up late at night and write, and the house is quiet, people sleeping. I have a lot of kids and things and animals, and I was saying, what's it like, you know, if you were in a hotel, it's the same kind of thing, empty house, and you know, curtains blowing, and so you have that whole kind of thing. So that's all that was. Okay. What he was talking about, I think, was toward the end when he talks about that kind of poetic, I hope poetic, run with. He tells his daughter that kind of thing he's sort of leaving as a legacy for her. You know, if you've screwed up, you can start all over again. There's no rules to this thing and all that stuff. And what he did give me is a direction. So I said, I don't know how to write this. I don't know really what to do with this. He said, well, make believe you're dying. He said, and now you want to leave your children some advice. And it actually had dovetail. I had cancer when I was younger, and I remembered thinking, I hadn't written it out, what I would like to tell my children as to things that were important to me, you know. So he found that, you know. So that's maybe what he's talking about.
Well, actually,
but I don't know about regrets. I mean,
because a lot of characters in the film have regrets, and it's things that have peppered into other works of yours as well.
Yeah, I don't. That's interesting. I mean, because I don't really dwell on regret that way. I don't think it's healthy to go backwards that way altogether. I mean, there are things you've done wrong, but sometimes you can't do much about it, you know.
Well, how is length an issue? You know, never because the movie's 2 hours and.
No, I know 40. It's long.
so that was never an issue. Okay.
Well, it's an issue. It was an issue with some audiences. It's been an issue with the studio.
How long was your shooting draft?
The page count?
Yeah.
Well, on my old movie program, it was 170 pages. On theirs, it was 220.
Margins, my friend.
No, it's like called Movie Master versus Final Draft. Yeah, it's like an old program I have. I've always said that the movies I've written are as long or as short as the directors want to make them. If I do something, I probably do overwrite, where they probably find an embarrassment of riches and maybe don't know what to cut. David felt the length of this was right. I mean, I can't. I mean, I don't know really what I'd cut. I could tell you 10 things you could cut, and on the other hand, I don't know if any of them are worth cutting. And you could probably find, even with an audience here, will say, well, I think we really don't need that sort of what if sliding doors thing. You know, if the phone didn't ring and all that. But I think that's what distinguishes those kind of things.
Actually, I like that story.
I love it. So I love it too. But you could see I'll tell you what the studio wanted to cut.
Sure.
They wanted to cut out the lightning guy.
Well, actually,
that's totally true. They thought, what do we need him for? He's like solely extraneous.
He takes up about 40 seconds.
Exactly. But it goes to show. So in other words, I mean, a director's task is finally to figure out what he thinks tells the story best. That's why they have final cut, Right. Otherwise, then the studio makes a decision.
Was there ever an end to him? Because there was setup payoff of all the lightning strikes he had. I was just waiting for lightning to strike right into the retirement home and kind of off.
It's funny you say that because no, there was nothing. Actually, there's only 6 strikes if you count it.
Right. Because
I know everybody's been on the internet. Oh my God, that changes your life. I mean, that's real important. I always said, well, that's for the next movie, But what you did bring up is kind of interesting. It's the same thing I did with Forrest Gump. I realized because in this sense, I had all these little kind of, and it would really have been like a 4-hour movie. I had all these other kind of tangents I went off on. For instance, there's that character, Pleasant Curtis, that's mentioned for like 2 seconds now. Well, at one point I had where he said, well, he comes from X, or I don't know, Dixville Notch, some nonsense place I made up. And then I talked about, though, which I do know something about, the Appalachians. And people who lived there, they had these guys called far roamers that would just take off from their families, and then they'd go sit with people who are sick and also have affairs with various women and this and that. And the most famous far roamer was like Daniel Boone. And Daniel Boone had a famous story that he was in the, I think, Cumberland Mountains. And it was totally empty, of course, during his period of time. And he ran into somebody else, and the guy says, isn't this beautiful? And he says, it was till you showed up. And the point being, I showed all that, though. So that was a whole run I did. I did a whole thing with this Comanche that's in there. I had a whole thing about, well, he had been 500 years, and I said the Comanches, they lived in there. They'd been living in Atlanta, Georgia for, I don't know, 100 years, and all of a sudden the government decided, let's move them out of here. So they took these people who had been shopkeepers and everything else with, gingham dresses, and that was the Trail of Tears, and I showed the Trail of Tears. I thought, gee, might as well show it. So in other words, it is those kind of things, these kind of extravagances. And so David said, I think, we can maybe say some of this rather than show all of it.
Was there anything cut out of this movie that you want to tell us about?
No, nothing.
Okay.
I mean, I can't think of one thing that really he took out.
And I did like the Daisy injury scene because, it really was a story within a story, within a story.
Well, that was something I always wanted to do. That I was always taken with Alan Pakula's death, the director, who I knew him fairly well, and he died in just this freak accident on a freeway lane in New York thoroughfare lane, and something fell off a truck, went through his windshield, and killed him. And I said to myself, gee, if he had been in the other lane, he's not going to die. If he had left the house 2 minutes, it's not some grand genius on my part, but it's just a thought I had that's kind of interesting. If you want to talk about accident and destiny, fate, and all those kind of things.
What was your toughest scene here for Benjamin Button? The scene maybe that you came back to a couple times.
I think the scene that was, I don't think I would have come back to it so many times, but everybody, they're all nervous about the fact he left this child, which is, emotionally hard. And I think what saved the day was her look. She said, I can make this work where I can show how I feel about it, And yet it didn't doom him, because it was like... you brought up a thing about Forrest Gump. Well, in Forrest Gump, there had been a scene where Jenny, Robin Wright, as a younger woman, have her do a thing where she kills her father with like an international harvester. And Bob Zemeckis says the audience will never recover from this. He said, even though it's kind of ironic and sort of funny the way it's done, they will never really quite forgive her, not because he didn't deserve it, but that they'll always have a bad feeling about it. I'm not sure he's right or wrong, but I think that was an interesting point, and that was something that sort of resonated with me, this whole thing about, well, how's the audience ever, Brad was always nervous, how are they going to respond to me after I leave this little child, and I said, well, if we can make it up where it ends up you might have done the right thing. In other words, an unselfish thing, it may, it was painful what you did, but that, and we even have her say, you were right, I couldn't have raised both of you.
Actually, I was going to ask about that. I mean, I like the film a lot, but that was a question in my mind because he said that he didn't want her to be raising him as well. And when he shows up, she's 12, his daughter's 12, and he seems to be about 18. It seems like could have stayed around longer before he did his walkabout.
Well, yeah, except for I think he didn't want her to have a memory of him. So that was the idea, So shoot me if I'm wrong.
No, not at all. I mean, but so you see it as kind of a self-sacrifice to make his daughter's life easier.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly, yeah.
We're going to open up to the crowd for some questions. Right there, you, sir, on the aisle. Questions regards to the philosophy of the pre-will or predetermination values of how we live our lives and that encapsulated.
That's a pretty, a longer conversation, I guess, as to whether
whether
you believe in God or not. I mean, as some form of God or some form of something that's some predetermination of what happens to us. I don't know the answer to that. I guess I'd say I was an agnostic in that sense. Probably more toward accident, I guess, but so I'm not sure there's any grand design. I guess if I had to think about some grand design, it'd be more about some sort of universal thing. I mean, something about atoms in space and that kind of thing. I mean, nothing intelligent I could tell you, I wish I could, but I don't.
Stick around. We have a poster for you. We're going to give a few posters away for people with questions. You, sir, right there. He appreciated the sense of humor. Does that come organically while you're writing or something through a rewrite?
I think that's organic when I'm writing. And I start feeling a little self-effacing about what I'm doing, and I'm probably poking fun at myself for trying to think I'm being too serious, Just a wryness I might have,
Right here, you, sir, in the front row. When you're writing, do you ever get ideas for another story that lead you in a different direction?
Yeah, no, that's what I like about not outlining, actually, that if you're not wedded to a book or something, that you can have certain characters or ideas take you other places that you were not prepared to go, and then it opens up whole worlds. I know Joan Didion does that. She used to sit and watch people get off airplanes and say, I wonder where they're going, what their life's about, and then she could follow that. I think that's just about writing, I always use this example of E.L. Doctorow, the great novelist, how he had a writer's block, and after he'd written the Book of Daniel, and I think it went on for a while, and he was staring at his wall in his house, and I think it's Albany. I could be wrong, but I think it's upstate New York somewhere, and he said, gee, I wonder who built this house, when was it built, who built it, what were they like, and this and that, and he ended up writing Ragtime from that. In other words, so that's just, and I think that's the process, for probably someone who paints too or does music, that you start with something that takes you somewhere else.
Right there, you, ma'am, in the front row. How long did it take you to write the script, and were you on set during the production of the film?
It took me the first draft about a year plus, as I said, and I constantly rewrote after that, so that not giant changes, but always, something in kind. And then I was on the film as much as I was on any other film. I don't like to go to the set. It's a big bore. I pick out some things that I think I'd enjoy watching, and something that I think might be difficult, where the director might need just my you got to be careful of that, though, because you don't want to give the director excuse to have you start explaining things to the actors all over again. So it's a little bit of a tightrope walk, and they really don't make you very, you've probably all been on sets and stuff, but they don't make you very welcome on a set. I mean, the only person who would seem to me would need like a trailer is someone to write in. You don't have that, and it's like, what am I doing here after a while,
Your process of rewriting, was there anything you want to tell us about the way you rewrite your own stuff?
No, I don't like rewriting.
Interesting.
I wish I could just turn it in and say goodnight.
All right.
But no, but I think you need to rewrite. I mean, this one had only one. The only rewrite that was difficult in this one was David panicked out of nowhere about something with the postcards. I don't remember anymore what it was, but it seemed like the end of the earth at that moment. And so we had to go in. It wasn't really rewriting. We had to reorganize something. how the story was being told.
You ma'am in the red hat, this is the last poster that we actually have, but we'll still take more questions. She thought the tension coming from Katrina was very effective and foreboding. Could you talk about plotting that out?
I'm not sure I per se plotted that out. I mean, in other words, I did utilize it as obviously some background stuff, and then I tried to, maybe you're right, maybe I did. Some of this stuff I don't even think about doing, it just happens. But I guess I did. I knew at some certain points it needed to have some tension to certain things, so that I might have increased what I was most concerned about became this sort of the hurricane's on, the hurricane's off, the hurricane's on, the hurricane's off. So that I was a little worried about that because it's a long period of time. So I try to follow. Actually, I think it's somewhat factual as best as I could determine. If you put it with vis-a-vis what time was then. That at first they didn't think was going to land, and then all that you're more aware of than I'm sure I am. And I try to then probably gauge that to certain things were going on until it started to sort of tighten the screws as you would in any kind of drama toward the end of the piece.
All the way in the back row, you, sir, in the hat. Question was in regards to the utilization of African Americans in both this and Forrest Gump as great friends of the protagonist.
Well, I think part of it is the Bubba character was in the book, so that I didn't invent that. So that that was some natural kind of thing to the South in a way, I guess. And the same was true here to some extent, a little less, but in the short story there was a nanny that wasn't utilized the same way. I don't know what that is. I mean, I didn't have a nanny or anything. I don't know. So, boy, maybe I'm bothered by that. I don't know. I have to think about that. That's very fair. I think maybe that's some sort of parochial idea about the South, which is probably bullshit, I don't know. I have to really think about it. I don't know. It's fair enough. But, I mean, I think everybody's pretty human. I think that's fair, right?
You, ma'am, right there in the red. Could you talk about the hummingbird popping up places unexpected?
That was just, I have outside my window, there's a hummingbird that keeps popping up. And I sort of like it. I mean, it sort of makes me feel comfortable in some strange way. So I thought, that's kind of interesting. So I just looked for fun what was, I don't know. I learned something actually the other day. Someone told me that hummingbirds are one of the few birds that fly backwards. So I thought, that's pretty interesting. I wish I'd have known that.
Sequel, you, ma'am, right there. Question was in regards to how many screenplays do you work on concurrently? And second question was interesting points of departure from scenes that, for her and her friends were just starting to pique their interest.
Well, they're very different questions. I try not to work on more than one, but sometimes things start... I have no control over. In other words, some things at a various stage, waiting for an actor, or I think I have 4 or 5 things right now that are different, and I'd rather not. It starts making me insane. The second part, I couldn't answer you that because the scenes were written out as they were, and David decided, probably much to your dismay, to leave them to some. But I think otherwise, I don't know the answer. How long is the movie going to be then? So this was his rhythm to what he felt the movie would tell the story. One person's poison is another one's perfume.
You, sir, in the aisle, in the black.
Well,
how do you know when you're done with your rewriting each day and also figuring out your flashbacks?
I just at some point think I'm done, that I've now expressed everything. And literally this is truth. After I've turned the script in, I wish I could start all over. Like everybody else feels, right? How could I have screwed this whole thing up? And then when you look at it again, you say, gee, I wish I had done it this way. But then I think that's the eternal thing for any person who's creative, that you probably never feel completely satisfied. I'll bet you Tennessee Williams didn't think the Glass Menagerie was perfect or something, you know what I'm saying? As perfect as that is. I don't know the answer to you except for that on the flashback thing is the same question basically you'd asked me, Jeff, that it becomes a structural thing, and so I just know to go back to it. In other words, I have to sometimes figure out where. The more complicated one I've ever done was The Good Shepherd, because I jumped all around in time, and I always get confused myself to a certain extent where we were. So I'm actually playing with doing a part 2 to that, which I don't know why. But that De Niro wants to do it again, and Matt Damon does, and so I'm going to try to make it much more literal and much more sort of plain speaking.
What would it be? Do you have a title?
No, I don't not title, but it's the next 20 years.
Wow,
it's pretty easy. It's pretty obvious.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Well, we'll see.
I love Good Shepherd. You, sir, the blonde guy, the blue sweater. He liked the lighting. He was curious how much that kind of direction is on the page.
There's some. I mean, in other words, I'll give some indication of what I think the sort of the feeling of the mood is and what the light is to, if I say it's evening and it's cool or something. But otherwise, that's all them. In other words, I think from what I heard at one of these kind of panel things, they usually try to use as much natural lighting as possible. There's very few.
He was also talking about the light differential in your flashbacks, but that was never highlighted.
I don't think I did. That's David. I think
okay.
Probably trying to show you something.
Cool.
Yeah.
You, sir, right here in the aisle. The question was just the long process of getting a film made. Good Shepherd.
Well, look, I'm very blessed. I get to keep working on other things. I had other things that were going on. I think I would say most of the ones I've worked on that were the more difficult ones and everything took longer to get made. A Good Shepherd take 12 years. I mean, so I went on to other things. I mean, it sat there, and then the right time either came along, or I have a couple probably just still sitting there that will probably never see the light of day. I wrote one now about 6-7 years ago for Michael Mann called Comanche that I think is a great script. And it probably just won't get made. There's many reasons.
Wasn't Devil in the White City a script of yours?
No, I'm going to write that.
That's something you're going to write. Good.
So funny. That's real.
Yeah. What about the Forrest Gump sequel of Gump and Company?
I turned that script in, this is honest to God truth, on 9/11. And we sat and looked at each other the next day, and we said, "This is of no."
Sorry, speak up.
I turned it into Bob and Tom Hanks, and it wasn't called Gump and Company, but that
was one title error.
Yeah, I know. That's what.
What was your title?
I didn't. I just Forrest Gump too.
Okay.
But it seemed irrelevant. I mean, in other words, toward the great, sort of the us dealing with our mortality. Now, I just. So I don't. I did have. I'll tell you some things that are in it. They're fun.
Please.
Got Forrest Gump in the back of OJ's Bronco.
Well, that's reality, right?
Yeah, that's real. And he keeps popping his head up. I had. What else I had? I had him be a waltz champion. And he and his partner sort of danced all over the place. And one of the big things for him was he danced with Princess Diana. When he was, what else? Silly stuff. I mean, he found his calling. He's a bingo caller for a while. I'm trying to think what else. He has a child with a lesbian couple. It's pretty good. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's pretty. I mean,
years later. I mean, is there any chance you might?
No, there's not. Well, it started actually.
I mean, now, like in
no, I don't think so.
retrospect.
I don't think anybody's interested in. I think that's sometimes things are best left untouched. There were some nice things in it that I thought was sort of beautiful, but the one thing, the one thing I liked about it was that it started literally 30 seconds after the last one ended, and we just come right back to him sitting waiting on the bus bench for the kid to get home. The kid dies of AIDS, which is that kid who is in Florida, that Ryan, whatever it was. And actually what I did was, I don't know why I'm remembering all this, so funny, but Ryan White, that's exactly right. But simultaneously there was a lot of demonstration about busing. So I had everybody very confused at the school with school buses coming in and this kid dying. I don't know. But the one thing I did that was clever was because they really wanted to hide this script. They didn't want anybody to see what it was. So I did a adaptation of a Victor Hugo short story, which is a famous short story about a cannon that gets loose on a ship. And I have a woman's name on it. And it's called, whatever that name of that was, The Cannon. And so you read this, and it's a pretty great short story that Victor Hugo wrote where this, I don't know what it is, 500-pound cannon, to have a cannon loose on a ship when the ship's at sea is like, it tears the whole ship basically apart. And they're able to finally stop the thing. And so this guy tells this story, and I, had this all shown, and then you hear this other voice says, well, if you think that's a story, and then he starts Forrest Gump, so.
That's very interesting, actually.
Yeah, I don't know if it is, but.
Come on, publish it one of these days. All right, one or two last questions, and then we are done, kids. You, sir, on the aisle. Great question. As a writer, what do you think is key or vital about your relationship with a director?
I think you have to maintain your independence. In other words, that he's going to respect you as much as you respect him. That you don't be... I mean, here's the one thing that's a fact. That you are the woman in the relationship. I don't care who you work for. In other words, you are going to be treated like the date, okay? In other words, because they eventually... I'll tell you a quick story. I had written the original version of The Onion Field for Stuart Rosenberg, who was a nice director. He had done Cool Hand Luke and a few other movies, and I had rewritten a couple movies from Pope of Greenwich Village and something else. Anyway, we had a big fight about a scene, about whether I thought it was pretty great, the scene, and he said, no good. And we fought, I don't know, 2-3 days about it. And he said, look, why don't you leave in the script because I'm not going to shoot it. End of discussion. We moved on. So the relationship with the director, you have to maintain your independence. Tell them no. Tell them to go fuck themselves, and try to find a way to do what you want to do without them knowing it.
Was there anything here that you and Fincher disagreed on that was settled with a coin flip or something like that? Shot of whiskey?
No, I can't think of it. I mean, David has some whole idea about what's the word? About love in some way, about commitment. No, that's not the word. What's the word, Tara? Huh? Codependency. So I'm not sure quite what that means. But this is something that's important to him. It's about how people view their relationship, about how they can't breathe without the other person or something. I guess the best way to describe it. And he is not happy with this. So he does not want to make this. He could explain this better. That he felt this was. Want to make sure this was not a codependent relationship. I'm not sure what it meant. I still don't know what he means. So I'm not sure we really argue. I mean, I don't think I argued with. I'm trying to think why. There's a few directors I didn't like, so I argued with them. I don't think I ever argued. In other words, you sort of fight these things out creatively, and
good.
Because you're both. I think the good directors, you're both on the same. You're both on the same page. In other words, you want to do the best you possibly can, and if sometimes you get frustrated where they say they don't understand it, and you start standing your head and you say, "What are you, stupid?" And finally they say, "Just show it to me again."
Do you have any dream projects? Anything that you've really always wanted to do that you still hope to do?
The only one that sort of sticks around in my head and everybody thinks is so stupid is I've always been interested in doing Boswell and Johnson, and most people don't know who that is. He's a guy who wrote the English dictionary, 18th century England, and he was a older man, very depressed, maudlin kind of guy, a brilliant guy, not particularly good to look at. And Johnson was his Boswell was his biographer. He was a very contemporary guy. I actually talked to Tom Stoppard about doing it with me recently, so I might. I doubt it.
I hope you do.
I hope he writes.
That sounds great.
He's a better writer than I could ever be. So
you're a really talented writer. I can't wait to see what you do next. Give it up again for Eric Roth. Thanks for your time. Thanks a lot for coming down. And that's how the Q&A went down. Special thanks again to screenwriter Eric Roth for coming down and chatting with us about his latest film, The Curious Case of Benjamin Button. If you dug this episode of the podcast in general, consider tossing a virtual tip into our PayPal virtual tip jar by visiting www.creativescreenwritingmagazine.blogspot.com and look for the PayPal icon. Your tips are appreciated and definitely help out with equipment, hard drives, and all the other stuff we need to keep this podcast running. Of course, feel free to check out my blog, which I even managed to update on the rare occasion that I have time to do so by visiting www.jeffgoldsmith.blogspot.com. You can also always feel free to drop me a line by emailing me at yo.goldsmith@gmail.com, and I'll do my darndest to get back to you as soon as I can. Of course, don't forget to click that subscribe button in iTunes or your podcatching software, because that's how episodes are downloaded automatically every time you click refresh. And if you have a minute, feel free to leave us positive feedback in the iTunes Music Store or at podcastalley.com. I'm Jeff Goldsmith, Senior Editor for Creative Screenwriting Magazine, thanking you again for tuning in and telling you to stay out of trouble. Till next week.